I'm Wole Soboyejo here, and we're going to start with a short video on the global school. Morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this second virtual event of the Global School. I'm Wole Soboyejo, Provost here at WPI, and happy to be part of this event that's going to focus on science, technology, and innovation for African development. Next, please. So as we begin the virtual launch of the Global School, this, of course, is our second event, which will focus on Africa. And we're really looking to the discussion that's going to ensue from these interactions with perspectives from Africa, as well as perspectives, of course, from the WPI community. Our goal is to bring together the key stakeholders, partners, alums, students, faculty, staff, with interests in our global programs in Africa. And of course, what we're trying to do is to really tackle some of the world's grand challenge problems and opportunities, and to use our STEM background as an institution to engage the world. And so the big question, of course, is why the focus on science, technology, and innovation, not just from WPI's perspective, but also from a global perspective. And so to kind of frame this problem, I prepared just a few slides just to give some context to why the focus on science, technology, and innovation. Next. So if we look through history, history has shown that science, technology, and innovation are the engines of development. This is apparent in places such as North Africa, where old Carthage was, to Europe, North America, and most recently in Asia and the BRIC countries. And if you look very carefully, you find that a key variable is the number of scientists and engineers per million people that form a critical mass to drive development. The other key variable is the investment in gross domestic product, which typically is about 1% to 4% if you want to really drive up the development ladder. Next. And to put this into some context, I wanted to just revisit just relics of ancient civilizations that tell us what you can do with science and technology. And so if you look here, I'm showing pictures, of course, of the Great Pyramids of Giza and the obelisks of Ethiopia. And if you look at the civilizations many hundreds of years before Christ, you find that these civilizations had strong components of science and technology, as is evident by the things that they produced that really drove their preeminence many, many hundreds of years ago. Next. And if you go to Morocco, you see evidence here of the world's oldest university in Fez, which was founded by a Muslim woman, Fatima Al-Firi, in 859 AD. And this is a university that's older than Oxford, and older than many of the universities that we typically think of as the oldest universities. And it drove the training of many people, and even affected the thinking of a pope that visited them during the stages of the sort of Renaissance. And then if you go beyond Morocco, next please, you find that old Carthage was located in what is now Tunisia. And if you look at this schematic here, which is an image to your left of old Carthage, which of course is known by all of us from our knowledge of history, you find that old Carthage and the development that it had occurred well before the development of Rome and Greece. And in fact, if you look on the other side of the Mediterranean, you see that many of the images that you find in old Rome and old Athens really came from influences that really were really influenced by old Carthage. And so we see that there was significant development driven by the technical capabilities of the people that got transferred across the Mediterranean to Europe. Next, please. And then more recently, there's the example, of course, of the Asian tigers. And one of my favorites is the example of Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, who transformed a very poor deep harbor that turned out to be the gateway to China into a developed country in one generation. And it's interesting to see here that he recognized the importance of science and technology and investments as being strategic to the development of Singapore. So from the early efforts in the sort of oil refinery type of efforts, he transitioned very quickly to investment in science and technology for hard drives, for which Singapore today is now the global leader, and now pushing into biotechnology in the next frontier. And so if you look at old Singapore, if you go to my next view graph, you see that in one generation, in Lee Kuan Yew's lifetime, Singapore went from a country that looked like this to the next view graph, which shows a picture of modern Singapore today. If you go to the next view graph, which is a country that looks like this. And for Singapore, a very small island, very limited resources, the key investment was the investment in people. And the key investment was the investment in strategic research that was connected to innovation, that was connected to development as a key focus. And they were able to make this transition in one generation, 30 years. So as we look at these images, we see that there are some models, of course, the contexts are different, that give us a sense of what you can achieve with strategic focus on science and technology and innovation. Next. Another example of mine that I really draw a lot of inspiration from is the example of India. And you could imagine India at the end of World War II, when Nehru took over shortly after independence, was considered to be a poor country. But Nehru at the time, really a lawyer, a Cambridge-educated lawyer, believed in the idea that by investing in the best and the brightest of Indian students, they could create the basis for the transformation of India. And so they started the Indian Institutes of Science and the Indian Institutes of Technology to train the very best and the brightest in India in a way that could provide the basis for the transformation of India. And as we look back, this turns out to be the best investment that India could have made, because today, many of the products of these institutions are now the leaders of the world's major corporations, including Microsoft, Google, and others. And this came from an investment in a place that looked like this. This is the building of the Indian Institute of Science and Indian Institutes of Technology that are distributed across India that have produced the human capital and elevated the game for science and technology in India. Next. So what did this do? This is what Bangalore looked like uh, at the beginning of this exercise. And today, Bangalore looks very different, looks like this. And so the transformation that's occurred due to the investment in human capital has really been dramatic. And not only has this been in infrastructural transformation, it had also, of course, has been in terms of the contributions of scientists and technologies from Bangalore to innovation across the world. And so as we look at this, we basically start realizing, of course, that there is the potential to do this not only in Asia, but really across the world. Next. And so for me, I have to tell you that I was inspired by many of these ideas. And one of the things that I've tried to invest in is invest in time to establish the so-called African Institutes of Science and Technology. These are inspired by the Indian Institutes of Science and Technology, but with a focus on grand challenge problems. So the one in Abuja focuses on energy and materials. The one in Tanzania focuses on the life sciences. One in Burkina Faso focuses on water and the environment. And the whole idea here was to create a network of these universities to train the best and the brightest, hopefully in ways that will contribute to institutions and the development of scientific technological capital in Africa. Next. And today, this is just an example of the AIST in Abuja. It's called the African University of Science and Technology, where I served for a while with students from all over Africa who go there irrespective of their ability to pay. Many of these students are now in universities across Africa. Some also working in industry. And we need to have many more in ways that I believe that can contribute to this whole effort of building a critical mass of scientists, technologists across Africa. Next. But I think that we also need to think a little bit strategically using systems approaches and interdisciplinary approaches about how we bring people together to have impact. And I think this is where WPI's approach is really strong. I think naturally, with the interest that we have from folks from multiple disciplines, from the sciences, from engineering disciplines, from the humanities and arts and social sciences, we have the ability to bring people together to look at how do we tackle grand challenge problems associated with health, with water, with energy, in ways that engage us as teams working with partners across the world to co-create solutions to many of the world's biggest problems. And so within that context, one of the things that we're really hoping we build on is the efforts that we've established over the last 20 years to really bring teams of people together in ways that lead to co-creation of solutions across these different areas. And so what we're thinking of is bringing our strengths in science and technology to develop solutions that really have systemic impact, and to do this in partnership in a strategic way that can build really development, not just in our partner countries, but also here at home through the way in which we do things. And so next, please. Now, in the case of Africa, we're also really committed to the idea of going from simple artisanal basic levels of production to the scaling that comes by the development of sustainable industries that can really create wealth for people. Here I'm just using the example of mining. If you look to your top left, you see the example of a woman scraping from the earth, trying to eke out a living in a continent that's rich in minerals. And of course, this person will eke out a living, but it's certainly not a prosperous living. If, on the other hand, we bring the expertise of WPI in science, in engineering, in management of people, and work closely with folks in these places that have these kind of resources. What we can go is to go from very basic, difficult artisanal mining to more sustainable methods that leverage technology and science in appropriate ways to create value for the people. And this is the kind of project that Rob Kruger and the team are doing in Ghana to really look at ways of reducing the exposure of folks to toxic mercury, and also look at ways in which we can create value and wealth for artisanal people working in organized structures. And by the way, this is the secret to Africa's richest man's success, Aliko Dangote. What Aliko Dangote has done is to find ways of translating those resources through industry into wealth. And what I'm hoping is that our projects, as we begin to grow them, will grow from the experimental work that's going on in labs and communities across Ghana into places across Africa where we can grow hopefully many more Dangotes to create true value from the resources of Africa. Next. And if you look at those resources, they're huge. They're in every country. The real question is, can we educate the right Dangotes of the world to develop those resources in ways that create value for those communities, in ways that develop industry, in ways that develop impact across a whole continent? And I maintain that with our project-based approaches, as we approach these different countries, by engaging in projects that ask the right questions, that co-create the right solutions that can scale, we have the opportunity to really have a transformational impact by working with our partners in ways that will enable us, hopefully over time, to do projects that enable these resources to be developed for the communities around them. Next, please. And this is true, by the way, not only for material resources, but for energy resources. I'm showing here the energy map that shows that geothermal energy, for example, could provide a third of the continent's needs between Egypt and Kenya. In that region, the geothermal resources are sufficient to provide the energy needs of the whole continent. Across the Sahara, you could provide a third of the energy needs from solar. And then if you look, a single drop of the Congo River could provide a third of Africa's energy needs. So what that means is that all the oil and gas in the Gulf of Guinea that runs from about Ghana down to Angola, which has 10% of the world's oil and gas reserves, could be used for other things. And this doesn't include the coal reserves of South Africa and many of the other reserves, for example, in nuclear resources in Niger, that would be excess capacity that the continent can use for other activities. So the question is, how do we do projects that really enable us to realize the potential of these resources, apply them to scalable industries, and how do we work with our partners to really figure out how to create real value from these resources across the continent? These, I think, are just some of the examples of projects that I hope our groups will consider as we broaden our efforts across Africa. Next. And then I just wanted to show this because I think that there's a lot of value in nature. And these are just examples of things that you could do with bamboo and natural materials in ways that give rise to true value by engaging our students in different projects. And I have to say that in the last 20 years in which I've been sort of engaged in collaborating with scientists and engineers and all sorts of humanists and others across Africa, I've had the opportunity to do research that convinces me that we can create true value by engaging in serious scientific and technological studies with our students in ways that inspire the next Africa. By the way, the image I showed to the top right there of the palm tree is actually a telecommunications tower in what I call the real Wakanda. And I think these are the kinds of projects that we can do with MQPs and IQPs, working with Ghanaian students and African students in ways that create a new value for natural materials. And as we think about these, next please, I want us to imagine that, the bamboo should not only be thought about as a material to use just for low-level structures. These are images of bamboo use in Shanghai in China, where they're now building skyscrapers out of bamboo. And I really dare to think that with some of the things that we're trying to do as we work with other countries across the world, we can inspire such use of natural sustainable materials. Next, please. And then WPI, I think, really brings the opportunity to leverage some cutting edge new fields that can enable Africa to leapfrog. Here I'm showing images of robotics in manufacturing, robotics in healthcare, and autonomous vehicles that are the vehicles of the near future. And I'm really thinking that as our projects emerge in developing countries, we should be thinking about how we work with the scientists and the technologies in those countries to leverage these technologies in ways that enable the different communities across the world to adopt and use those technologies in ways that are appropriate. So I see with our collaborations with universities across Africa and governments and institutions across Africa, the opportunity to use the WPI projects to drive such impact. Next, please. And so as we think about what we do, I encourage our groups to think about what are the big problems we want to solve? What are the projects we can complete through research that can drive applications and technologies, but to be motivated by societal impact, be it impact on policy, impact on business, and impact on outcomes, and do this in integrated ways in a way that leads ultimately to the directed efforts of our interdisciplinary groups driving impacts that we can measure. And so if one uses this as a framework, it gives us some guidance as to how we can take different discrete projects and combine them in an integrated impact. Next. So within WPI, there are a number of initiatives that are ongoing. We've had the COVID-19 initiatives this summer, where we've interacted with 25 different universities, trying to prepare them to address the challenges of COVID-19 by developing capacity to print PPEs and deliver them to local hospitals. We've been working with a number of African universities in an African Online Institute that attracted well over 3,000 people this summer who really were being prepared to deliver online in the era of COVID across Africa. We have, of course, the Maths and Science for Sub-Saharan Africa programs, where we're working on digital modules for teaching STEM in African high schools and primary schools and middle schools, where we've also worked with about 12 governments with the help of the World Bank to develop programs that are introducing students to digital modules for learning STEM, robotics and materials problems, modules for teaching problem solving. And so we see the opportunity to scale these in addition to welcoming many visiting scholars to WPI that are working with faculty in different areas in ways that are contributing to the training of future faculty in Africa. And then most recently, we started a diaspora university project in Kenya. And this is a project that's trying to build a university that's modeled after WPI in a region of Kenya close to Mombasa. Next, please. So as we do all this, it's really also great to really appreciate the wonderful work that's been done by WPI project centers in Africa. So we're excited by the Morocco Project Center and the work it's been doing on the solar house and fog harvesting. We're very excited about the Ghana Project Center under Rob Kruger with the work that's been done on gold mining and beneficiation and various community development projects. The Namibia Project Center, which is one of our one of our very well-established project centers with Creighton Pete and Joe Durian working on different community development projects. Then, of course, we have Project Center in Cape Town, which is one of our most popular project centers with a strong effort in community development. And as we look at the success of these, we're encouraged to now start thinking about new project centers in Kenya and in Zimbabwe. So there's a lot of opportunity to build on these project centers based on the organic interest of the community here at WPI. And we're really excited about the future that this will bring. Next. So for us, as we do this virtual launch of the Global School in this second event, it's really exciting just to put this into context. The first keynote speaker that we had for the first activity was Robert Langer, who's perhaps the world's most successful biomedical innovator of our time. Some people consider him to be the Edison of biomedical innovation of our time. And he gave a wonderful talk about a month ago as we launched this virtual series. Today, it's really a great pleasure to have as our keynote speaker the US ambassador, the Ghana ambassador to the US, Ambassador Bafo Ajay Bawa. And he will speak to us shortly about perspectives on science and technology for innovation in Africa. And the next speaker in the series will be Carlos Nobre, who's a Nobel laureate, who will talk about his work on the environment in December to our Latin America group.